everybody. This is Matt Amundsen. I'm here with Derek Wilson, and this is the Dadabase. We're here to have a conversation about dads and what sort of meaning that they have in people's lives. And with that, we'll get started. Derek, how you doing tonight?
You know, pretty good, Matt. Thanks for inviting me out. Good times.
You've got a great radio voice going on right now.
It's that baritone basso. Yeah, don't be jealous. You can't have it.
So here we're talking about dads, and you have a very unique situation in that the idea behind this is that we want to collect stories of people and their dads and what they meant to them and the sort of impacts that dads have. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your father?
Sure. So my situation was that I actually didn't have a father. That's not entirely true. I have a dad, just like everybody. Yeah, I exist. There was an egg was fertilized, okay? But my father chose not to be a part of my life. So throughout my childhood, I actually encountered my father maybe before the age of 17, maybe 3 times, 2 of which I don't even remember. One was for a birthday where apparently he bought me some shoes. I think I was 2 or 3. Mind you, my father, still to this day, will talk about the shoes he bought me when I was 2 or 3, as if that was a parental accomplishment.
Right.
And then I think at age 4 or 5, I vaguely, foggily remember an encounter. And then at age 17, my mother, after a court visit with my father to get more child support, which he loved to not pay, ended up asking my father to visit the house because I was about to go to college. And what was important to my mom was that I get connected with his side of the family, my grandfather, my grandmother, my paternal uncle, my paternal aunt. And so he did actually come. He showed up in a cab. I remember this vividly. My father showed up in a cab and came into our home, and he started flirting with my mom, which I guess if I wanted my mom and dad to be together, that would have been charming. It was not good. It was awkward.
Yeah.
And after some cajoling and him, saying what he needed to say, he did give me the contact information for my grandfather, whom, while he was alive until 2001, was more like a father to me than my own father. Hands down, not even a contest.
Can I ask a question on that?
Absolutely, please do.
So, just to make sure that I understand it, you said that your grandfather was more of a dad to you than your own dad.
Correct.
Did you not know your grandfather until you were 17?
Very good question. No, that's
true?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. I was disconnected from my father's side of the family completely. Now, there's questions in my mind if that was more my mom or more my dad. I think my mom tries to be very honest, and she would not deprive me of that connection with my father. I truly believe my father had wanted me not to be connected to his side of the family because I get the impression my father had told my grandfather stories about what he was doing with the resources my grandfather would sometimes give him to give to me.
Sure.
And so the worst kind of snitch is an honest snitch. And if my grandfather was talking to me directly, and my father was saying he was getting money for child support and giving it to me, and I was saying I never received a dime of that, granddad, the jig is up really quick. So I think my father had much more motivation for me not being connected to his side of the family than my mom did. So I tend to think that maybe my dad was more behind it. So that was my experience with my father growing up. And then very quickly after age of 17. I didn't see him again until my grandfather passed away in 2001, September 9th, 2001. 2 days before September 11th. And I was able to locate my father, who has lived with various women throughout his life, has not really had a home for a long time. He's kind of a nomad. And I was able to locate him, and then I, not forcibly, but actively encouraged him to drive down with me to Alabama to my grandfather's funeral. And so we spent 12 hours in a car together down, and then 12 hours in a car together back. And it was eye-opening. I don't know how much of what he told me was true, but that is probably the central memory I have of my father. The time we spent together while I was driving us down to his father's funeral.
Right. That's impressive.
Impressive. That's a good word.
I'm trying to find the right words here.
That's a good word for it. It's a what I call a hot mess, but yeah, I guess impressive.
So, what were your feelings towards your dad during that trip?
That's a good question. Complicated. Very complicated. You know, I don't know what people with fathers, I don't know how sons that have fathers active in their lives, how they interact with their fathers, but I can tell you that I would assume it is very easy to take information, family information for granted when you always have your dad present, when you always have access.
Right.
Because there was such a scarcity of available time with my father. I mean, this was easily the most amount of time I've ever spent with my father, and especially alone without anybody else. I was hungry to ask him questions. And the kind of questions I asked my father in the situation were not maybe questions that most people would think. I asked about family medical history, stuff that most people take for granted. Had he ever had a heart attack? Did he have family members with sugar diabetes? Like, stuff that you take for granted when you grow up with somebody that I needed to know for my own medical history that I've never been able to answer. When I would go to a doctor and fill out the questionnaire, I was normally able to fill out my mom's side pretty well. But my dad's side, there were lots of question marks, lots of unknowns, and doctors can't predict my body and my medical history, my medical future, unless they know my medical history.
Right.
So it was the stupid stuff I asked about.
I don't think that's stupid stuff at all.
Yeah.
To be perfectly honest, I mean, I think people would normally be caught up in all of the emotional sorts of questions, but they might not ever get around to that. So the fact that you took that, I think, shows a lot of ingenuity and intelligence on your part of like, this is the information that I have to walk away with for my own sake.
Yeah.
And maybe if there's extra time, I can get around to the emotional pieces.
Well, and it's funny because not only was I thinking, I have a love-hate relationship with wanting children. So that's partly because of my dad's influence in my life. He wasn't there, and it's hard for me to picture myself as a father because of that. However, what I would say is, if I want to have children, I need to be able to tell my children their grandfather's medical history. Like, these are things, again, people can take for granted until you really need to know that information. And so it wasn't, yes, it was about me. It was practical. But yes, it was about, like, my future generations or my wife so that she can plan for stuff like, you know, if we need to have extra cancer insurance or something because I've just a preponderance of cancer victims in my family or something. But there was emotional stuff. Now, I don't want you to think that it was all practical, hard facts. There was emotional things that we talked about. But what I would say is that a lot of the things my father told me, I didn't know if they were true or not. He oftentimes paints himself as a victim and very put upon. And it's hard for me to see him that way since he wasn't in my life, and I know he actively chose not to be in my life. So, how are you the victim again? So, yeah.
In what ways are you like your dad?
That's actually, as much as I'd like to admit that I'm not, no, I actually do have a lot of similarities with my father.
Given there wasn't a whole lot of nurture, I'm guessing most of these are nature involved.
Yeah, I have to believe that too, because
Right.
he wasn't available to do this to me. But so obviously you're familiar with Star Wars. And
Star Wars? What's that?
So the ways in which I'm like my father is that I feel like I have a light side and a dark side. And my light side, for the most part, with the exception of one or two things, is attributable to my mother. The dark side, with the exception of a couple of things, are attributable to my father. So what do I mean by that? My father, I think I'm like my father insofar as, and again, this could be colored and biased because I don't have a great impression of my father, but I can be very lazy. I go through periods of time where I work hard for long periods of time, and then I just don't feel like doing anything. I'm unmotivated for a period of time. I always assign that characteristic of myself to my father because while my father was industrious for a sizable portion of his life, by the time he was dating my mother, he had gone a little bit about my father's history. He went to a private school called Mount St. Joe's when in Baltimore. It had a lot of prestige when I was growing up, but when he was going there, it was very prestigious, and especially since he was a black man. This was a big deal. My grandfather paid for him to go to this school with all white people because he wanted my father to have the best opportunity to succeed. So he went to a prestigious school. He was president of the chess team, I heard. He was one of the captains of the football team, I've heard. Not from him, from other family members. And I actually visited that school and did look him up in some of the records. So I do know he attended, and I do know he was thought highly of. So he had that background. He went into the military to study dentistry in the Navy. And then what ended up happening is that he went to Guantanamo Bay. He got stationed at Guantanamo Bay, and that's where my father picked up a substance abuse problem. And from that moment on, his life became more unraveled. Before he met my mother, he had been married, had military service, smart guy, but after Guantanamo and after the substance, he slowly but surely became disentangled from his wife, got separated, met my mom, started working for Social Security, which for him was a step down, even though my mother thought it was a high achievement, which it was. It's federal, it's consistent, stable federal government work. But for my dad, he was slowly sliding down while my mom was kind of going up. And then after Social Security, I know he worked as a cab driver. And then he preferred to be paid under the table, partly because of child support. So the aspects of me that are like my dad is laziness, because he didn't want to work really hard on certain things. He wanted to work hard on the things he wanted to work on. I have a little bit of exploitive nature, manipulative sometimes. I try not to do it for long, and I try not to live in that space, but sometimes I want something and I want to get it, so I try to figure out the best way to do it. It's not always the nicest. I have a temper. So those are some of the negative things I inherited from my father. The positive things I would say I got from my father is I do believe my father is more intelligent than my mom. So my intelligence, the way it manifests itself, is definitely from my father. My industrial, how should I put this? When I work hard for a very specific goal, for a very specific result, I think that's more my father too. My mom believes in work just for work. It's almost like a worship. It's part of her commitment to being a Christian. My father works for very specific tactical reasons. And so I think I inherited some of that. I also think that one thing I inherited from my father was looking at the bigger picture and analyzing how things work overall globally. But that was a long answer. But that's
No, it's a great answer.
Yeah, but that's the similarities I have with my dad, I think.
So, one impact has not having a father in your life had on you, and then also on your interactions with other people?
I don't know how other people will answer this question in this television series, in this YouTube series.
Remains to be seen.
Exactly. What I would say is, I kind of think not having a dad in my life was a really positive thing for me. And I only say that because my mom reminds me, because, okay, I grew up wanting my dad, of course, and I felt incomplete. But I feel like my mom likes to remind me that if I had my father in my life, my specific father, not just any father.
That's fair.
If I had my specific father in my life, it would have ended poorly. He was, he had substance abuse issues. He had temper issues. He was very okay with letting other people, specifically women, put him up in a housing situation without him necessarily contributing, as a man would. So I believe that if he had been in my life, I don't think I would have the kind of character I do, unfortunately. That being said, there's so many things you take for granted that your mom can't teach you. Shaving for the first time. You're having underarm hair. You have smells that are just very, very, very distinct to men. Puberty for boys is different than puberty for girls. And those things my mom tried very hard to support me in and very hard to guide me in. But it would have been so much better to have a dad, because I went through a lot of things blind. And even to this day, I'm a little off because of it. And I say that because women oftentimes will tell me, "Oh, Derek, it's just like you're not like any man I've met." I'm like, I still like it. Thank you. I know you mean that as a compliment, but that machismo, that macho ideal, that's something that I always thought was normal. And the fact that I've always fallen short of that has sometimes bothered me in my life. And it has also prevented me from getting some of the types of women I may have wanted to try to get. My choice of women in my life have been very much based off of my strengths, and my strengths have been more being able to listen to women, be the softer skills.
Sure.
So overall, though, I think it's a positive thing that my dad was not in my life.
Yeah, it sounds as though your mom was concerned about the sort of impact or sort of role model that he would be for you in those situations, whether it's just as a man or as a husband or as a father.
Yeah.
You didn't grow up with that sort of influence, and given the sort of person that you're describing and that you know of him, that as good as it would have been to have a father,
it's true.
Maybe not that specific one.
It's true, and that bleeds into nowadays. I'm scared to have children. I don't tell a lot
that
of people
talks
that.
about how you,
Yeah.
right, that gets to the question of how this impacts you and influences you in your relationships with other people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I mean, think about it. I know that people have been having children from the dawn of time. Okay, we wouldn't have humans now if people hadn't had children. But raising a child is such a difficult experience. Not difficult as in the hardest. Well, yeah, the hardest thing you'll ever do. The most challenging thing. And to have a guide, to have a prototype, to have someone who has done it before you and can teach you how to do it is invaluable. Start doing it from scratch. I don't care how many books you read. I've read some parenting books and being a dad. I've talked to people who are fathers. It doesn't compare to having a father who's actually done it. Who
Have life experience to draw upon.
Exactly.
To look at and say, well, this is how my dad did it, and this is how I should do it.
It's practical knowledge, not theory.
Right.
And that makes me terrified to have children. Because I don't know what I'm doing, dude. I'm going to make mistakes that people who have had dads will not make, guaranteed. You know, and that has always been something that I'm like, I'll be a deficient father starting out. Yes, maybe I can earn it back as I go, but there are just critical things I will not know ahead of time. And yes, I can ask my friends. Yes, I've had kind of father figures in my life, role models, males who have given me great advice. But there is nothing that substitutes for having an actual dad that you can go to and say, hey, my daughter's sick. How did you handle it when I was sick? Or, hey, my kid wants to stay out later than curfew. How do I deal with that? Nothing can take away from the practical experience.
Right.
So, of even a bad father, that's the crazy thing. Even bad fathers, you can ask your father, and you're like, I don't want to do it this way, but at least it gives me a benchmark, a starting place.
Or you can ask for the reasoning behind it. Dad,
Correct.
when I stayed out late, why did you ground me? Why did you choose that route of discipline versus another route of discipline?
Yeah.
Right? At least give me some ideas as to why you chose to do what you did.
Exactly. And actually, Matt, that's something I would want to ask you, if that's okay.
Yeah.
What's an example of a fatherly piece of advice that you got from your dad that you don't think you could have gotten otherwise?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a fantastic question. I don't think I can point to anything right off the bat.
Yeah.
I'm sure once the show is over, and I'll follow up on the next episode, that I can't think of anything right off the bat. 20, 30 minutes from now, I'm sure I'll think of something.
No, that's fine.
But I think it comes down to exactly what you're talking about. It's just that I had an example to lean on in order to be able to say, like, here's the situation that I'm in. I'm faced with a kid who's taken her mom's makeup and run it all over her face.
Yep.
And is this a point where I should blow up and get upset? Or do I just accept that this is a little kid, 2-year-old thing to do and just laugh it off and clean them up and send them on their way?
That's right.
Right? What are the things that I should get upset about? What are the things that are worth getting upset about versus what aren't?
Huge.
Right? And by having those examples have helped.
Yep.
Now, I love my dad, but he had a temper himself. And so there were plenty of times where he got upset about something that he shouldn't have. And early on in my experience in fatherhood, I was a very young dad. I didn't know what I was doing. And so I followed his example as much as I possibly could, which meant in a lot of situations I would get upset where I shouldn't have.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there was an experience in my life where my oldest daughter decided that she wanted to go and live with her mom. And it was a heartbreaking moment for me. But I recognized that while I didn't necessarily agree with it, she was old enough to make her own choices about that. And that we should at least give her the opportunity to do that. And when her sisters came home, who were, I want to say 7 and 5 at the time, or somewhere thereabouts. No, they were 10 and 8. I realized that I needed to change. And I had already tried changing a bit and lightening up, of being like, I don't need to get upset about these tiny things.
Yeah.
This is just them being kids. And they don't need to be quiet around me all the time. They don't have to do that. They just need to live their lives, and I'm here to help with that. And so I worked very, very hard since that point to be a more supportive dad, and one that doesn't just fly off the handle on stupid little shit.
Yeah.
Like if they spill on the carpet. Perfect example. My daughter Bailey, 2-3 years ago, decides that she wants to paint her nails. Okay, great. Nobody's home. She decides to do it on her own. And she gets out some paper towels, lays them down, and then decides that it's more comfortable to do it on the couch. But she's got a paper towel underneath it. So she's painting her nails, and the bottle tips over and spills onto the carpet. That sucks.
That's not great.
It sucks.
Not good. Not good.
And I came home to find her kind of sort of covering it up. And so I asked her what happened, and to her credit, she just admitted, like, I screwed up, I spilled on the carpet, I got nail polish on it. And there were some spots where she had left to go get some cleaner and then came back up, so there's these different spots along the carpet. Okay. You were honest about it with me. It's totally fine. So let's clean it up. And so I went and got the nail polish remover and some alcohol and just sat there and scrubbed and scrubbed and scrubbed and scrubbed in order to get it out there. And there might be a faint impression of it even to this day, but I didn't get upset. After finding out that it worked, I called her back down from her room because she decided that she was going to hide in her room before things got too upsetting.
Yeah.
I from Dad a little bit, but I really wasn't all that upset. I just said, so you need to come down and you need to help me. And so she and I sat and scrubbed and scrubbed and scrubbed and scrubbed for a good 45 minutes or whatever. And we got out as much as we could.
Yeah.
And doing great. And because of that, it pointed out a moment where my dad would have just blown his top. He would have just been screaming and yelling, really, really upset. And why aren't you taking better care of things? Why didn't you think this out beforehand? And all of that. And instead, it was a bonding moment between my daughter and I, where she knew that she could come to me with something where she had screwed up. And I wasn't going to blow my top over it. It was just going to be like, okay, well, what do we need to do to take care of it? Yeah. And that moment stands out for me. There's another one with my daughter Anna. We had just moved into our house. We've got this wonderful staircase that runs up from the bottom of the house up to the second floor. And on the banister, there's a post. And at the very top of the post, she must have been like 7 years old or so, was this little carved A right into the top of it. And I saw it, and I was about to get upset. And I called all the kids, and I already knew who had done it. Already knew. But it was like, I need to know who did this. Don't bother lying, because I already know. And Anna stepped up and she said, I did it.
It's a big A. I mean, come on.
Right, right. Really hard to hide. That A is still there because I can't get rid of it. I can stain it, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
It's too much work.
Yeah.
But as I look at that A today, I look at it as my daughter told me the truth. She didn't hide from me. She took responsibility for something that she screwed up.
Yep.
And I love that A on there now. When I move out of the house, I'm going to be devastated that I've got to leave that behind. But it's something that means something to me.
Yeah.
So it's that sort of thing that I see when I look at what things I get from my dad, how I'm different,
Yeah.
and things that I've learned from watching my own dad.
Absolutely.
And my dad even got to a point towards the end, I'd say the last 20, 30 years of his life, where he tried to lighten up too.
Yeah.
He recognized some things about himself and got some medical assistance in order to help deal with some of his emotional issues. And made improvements, and he recognized that he got too hot under the collar too often.
Yeah.
And so I think, as I look back at it, all of us as dads want to honor our own dads, those of us who have them.
Yeah.
And
those of us who don't sometimes.
And even those of us who don't.
Our imaginary straw man dad, who's the perfect father, who just was an African king. You know, I had my fantasies. Okay, I had my fantasies.
I actually have a question about that.
Yeah,
we'll get to that. But you're always looking for that fatherly acceptance. But you're also looking to do better than your dad.
Yeah.
And recognizing that nobody's perfect, and everybody's going to make mistakes. In that process of raising children, because it's unavoidable, you still want to advance the cause just a little bit further.
That's right.
So that your kids have a better dad than you did. And hopefully their children will have a better dad than you are.
That's right.
And so forth and so on down the line.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what makes these conversations important.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because if we can draw off of everybody else's experiences and stories, then it helps us improve to be better people and be better parents to our children.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, Matt, you said something that's very important, ties to the point I was trying to make. When you have a father, you at least know what you want to do or what you don't want to do. It's a starting point.
Right.
Now you can choose to move your family history forward or backwards or left or right, but at least you have a starting point. Whereas with someone who doesn't have a father, I'm the starting point. Right. No pressure, Derek. Just get everything fucking right. And that's the scary part. It's like everything I do is like the first time. And but when you have a father, you have the, and I'm not going to say luxury, but I would say that you have the advantage of having a chain, hopefully an unbroken chain of men, you know, great-grandfather, grandfather, father, you know, your child, your children's child, your child's child. You know, you have this unbroken line of teaching and loving and building and investing and but when you don't have a father, it's this brokenness where it's like I felt like part of my success in life, Matt, has come from the fact that I feel like I've had to reinvent the wheel 1,000 different times because I never had a template for it. So no, I 100% agree with you. I'm glad that you were able to see that as an opportunity to, you know, not overreact with your daughter, you know, and say, hey, it's okay. both instances with the nail polish and with the
Banister,
the carving,
Post.
the post. So that's huge. But hey, man.
Well, you had brought up fantasy dad,
Oh boy, that is that, yeah.
right? And I think that's regardless of whether you have a dad or not. In today's society, and when we grew up, you're inundated with TV shows and those sorts of things, and movies and so forth, where you see different dads acting out, or and sometimes it's goofy, and sometimes it's the sitcom dad, and sometimes it's something different. But I'm curious, as you grew up, were there dads that you saw, whether it be in real life or whether it's in the media, that you looked at and was like, man, I wish that was my dad?
Here we go. So there was a dad who I thought was my dad. Let me rewind that. There was a dad who I thought was my fictional dad, but represented what my real dad was.
Okay.
There's a movie called Coming to America. Okay. It stars Eddie Murphy and James Earl Jones. And Eddie Murphy is this crown prince of a fictional African country.
Let me write that name down. Eddie Murphy?
I know you don't know him. But and his father, James Earl Jones, is the king of this country.
Oh, Mufasa.
Exactly.
Okay.
And what I can tell you is, and this is 100% true. Everything else I lied about, but this is true. When I was growing up, I thought the reason why my father was not in my life was because he was really an African king who had just traveled to America and happened to have a dalliance with my mom, and so she thought everything my mom thought was true for what she knew. But then he left back, and he was just waiting to give me the keys to the kingdom. You know?
Waiting for you to come of age.
Exactly, and I
could see where that would be valuable. Where you're growing up in order to appreciate what it means to not have anything.
Yeah.
And here you are on your 18th birthday, and here we're going.
Oh, here you go. Here's a whole
home.
country. It's like,
right.
And that I will say, and I don't tell a lot of people this, but that fantasy was so prevalent that I would say that I believed it probably up until my father actually, maybe even 17 years old. I would say that I don't think I actively believed it at 15, 16, but it was always in the back. Yeah, it was always in the back of my head.
Right.
So when my father comes in a cab and gives me the name of my grandfather, and none of them are African royalty, I was a little disappointed. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you, because I felt like, okay, I've been deprived of a father, but at least if my father is so kick-ass and so amazing that it overrides the years of not having him, it's worth it. I felt like if I could make a narrative where my sacrifice ended up paying off, then it would make the world make sense. And the truth of the matter, it did. I didn't have that. So, But,
So I want to go over some stats
please.
with you that I pulled off the internet.
Yeah,
Not quite out of my ass, but still exist.
if you have your ass, they probably smell bad, but hey.
Well, I did have those mozzarella sticks earlier.
I'm pretty sure that if I was a father, I would read my child Everybody Poops. There's a book.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone Poops or something like that.
Everybody Poops.
Yeah.
Yep.
I do that.
Yep. That actually, I've got to write that question down.
Please do.
What's your favorite book as a father?
If I was a father, that book would be important to me, but there's another one. Go to Fuck to Sleep. I think it's narrated by Samuel L. Jackson.
Samuel L. Jackson. Yep.
That would be so amazing. And the wife that I would have as a father would stab me in the throat, but it would be worth it. Go to Fuck to Sleep. Sorry.
Okay. So here you are. You're a well-educated man.
Thanks.
Speak very well.
Thanks.
You are successful in both social and professional aspects.
Thank you, Matt.
Absolutely. I think this is stuff that you probably already know, but I want to go over it with you to get your reaction of what you were able to succeed despite.
Oh,
and I think that these are things that, from our prior conversations, you've said that you've seen in person. And like I said, I'm just looking for your reaction to it.
And by the way, I appreciate you doing your research. That's awesome. So hit me.
So, according to the U.S. Census Bureau from 2011, children in father-absent homes are almost 4 times more likely to be poor.
Correct.
In 2011, 12% of children in married couple families were living in poverty, compared to 44% of children in mother-only families.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So, giant increase in mother-only families.
Yeah.
Children living in female-headed families with no spouse present had a poverty rate of 47.6%, over 4 times that of married couple families.
Correct. Oh, yeah. Correct.
Drug and alcohol abuse.
Hit me.
Right. The United States Department of Health and Human Services states fatherless children are at a dramatically greater risk of drug and alcohol abuse. There is significantly more drug use among children who do not live with their mother and father.
Absolutely. I believe that 100%.
Physical and emotional health. A study of 1,977 children aged 3 and older living with a residential father or father figure found that children living with married biological parents had significantly fewer externalizing and internalizing behavioral problems than children living with at least one non-biological parent. That's a lot of words.
Yeah.
So what it comes down to is that if you are 3 and older and you have a mommy and a daddy, you have a better understanding of how to externalize and internalize emotional issues that you are going through.
Okay.
Than if you had only one biological parent.
Okay.
Make sense?
I can see that.
Okay. Let's see here. Children of single-parent homes are more than twice as likely to commit suicide.
I could see that, actually.
Yeah. Let's see here.
So it's hard because I want to comment on everything, but I'm not going to be able to keep it straight, everything like in succession. So
you interrupt me
take a
anytime
pause?
you want.
Okay. So
this is your episode. So.
Okay. Thank you very much. So the poverty thing. That's a simple one. My mother was one person. Right. She couldn't make as much as 2 people would make. Number one, and childcare. So she actually did end up having babysitter when she had to work overtime. So there was that aspect too. But you want to add something too?
I did. I wanted to add the fact that it's a single mother, female worker, less likely to earn as much as a man.
Right. That's right.
And she had the double whammy. That's not the right way.
Of being black. Hey, let's call a spade a spade. Which is kind of racist too. But
you said it, not me. We've had that conversation before. So
yeah, no, you're 100%
but it's absolutely true. Unfortunately, they don't have the same ability. Well, they have same ability.
They have the same
don't have
ability.
The opportunity.
Precisely. And on top of it, my mom never finished. She finished high school. She never finished college. So that's also going to factor into things. So number one, the poverty is real. Right. There is just no way. And thankfully, I was an only child. Had I had brothers or sisters, oh my God, it would have really been impoverished and really tough. As such, in my neighborhood, there were a lot of single family homes, and it was almost always the mother, not the father. And I, compared to some of my other friends, lived like royalty, even though I had eviction notices on the door. at least 10 times, if not more. I would actually say 10 times is pretty much an understatement. So, but I felt like I lived like royalty because I was the only child, and my mom was able to focus her attention on me when she wasn't at work, working overtime. So that's the poverty thing. What was the next thing? The second one?
I can go back.
Yeah, could we go back?
So we talked about poverty.
Poverty, okay.
Drug and alcohol abuse.
Okay. Drug and alcohol abuse. While rather than say drug and alcohol abuse, think of it as people without two parents are more likely to want to escape reality.
Yeah.
And when you picture it like that, it makes a lot of sense. So my mom was very religious. She ended up being a Pentecostal Christian. So we didn't have drug and alcohol abuse. Now, before she converted, she did. But afterward, she didn't. However, it's very, if you want to talk to my therapist, he would be more than happy to tell you that religion can be a bit of an escape too. You know, that faith,
Sure.
that believing in something
else's hands.
Exactly. Yeah. And also, what I would say is, when I was younger, I played a lot of video games. There were different forms of escape we did that we tried to be healthier about. So the alcohol and drug abuse in my household didn't happen, but it was happening in lots of households. And I can tell you that not only was it happening with the absentee fathers, but it was even happening in a functional way with the present mothers of my friends.
True.
So that's true.
So
that's real.
I want to try to travel down this road.
Please, yeah, absolutely.
And I might be creating a false narrative. But
I'll correct you.
Please
Matt,
do.
I'll correct
Please do. We just talked about poverty and the challenges that come with that. If you are facing poverty as a single mom without a father and the income that comes with that father, say nothing of the social and parental aspects of the dad, just income alone. If you are supporting a child on your own and you are poor, you're going to have a lower selection of where you get to live.
Correct. That's
Right?
absolutely correct. That's absolutely correct.
And so you already are behind the 8 ball in that respect.
That's the phrase I was actually going to say earlier, was behind the 8 ball.
So is your
You
bedroom?
are in I don't want to say a desolate, but you are in a tough position.
Less advantages, less opportunities.
Less advantages, less opportunities, and people are looking for that escapism. Whether it's
Hell
a
yeah.
single mom or it's a 15-year-old child who's looking for weed
Absolutely.
because their dad isn't around or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
You're also in areas that are going to be of higher crime and more likely to have those sorts of influences.
Well, and Matt,
Both drug and alcohol.
and here's the thing that you're not considering, because yes, everything you're saying is 100% accurate. But the other thing that you need to understand is, it's not like we're not in America. So you turn on the television, you see the Brady Bunch, you see, all these opportunities, you see Miami Vice, you see people being wealthy, people, Dallas at the time when I was in the 80s. You see people living well, having more than enough.
Deceivers.
Exactly.
Growing pains, yeah.
Exactly, growing pains. So you see a situation, and even Family Matters, the black family, the Winslows, had more than I had. And so not only are you combating, it's the tale of two Americas. You're dealing with the fact that your America is impoverished, with less opportunities, with a lot of hurdles and frustrations. But then you're seeing that there is an America that you can see on your television. You have a window to it every, Friday, every Thursday, whatever, must-see TV, where people are living with high quality of opportunity, high quality of wealth, high quality of social mobility, high quality of liberty, and you're like trying to reconcile that. That's where the drugs come in. I mean, the drugs definitely come in because you want to escape from your terrible reality. But then it's like, well, fudge, am I just broken? am I a loser because I see this reality, but I'm living this reality? How do I reconcile that? How does that work? And then there's the drugs. Well, that's where it meets in the middle. And so a lot of people don't factor that in. That when I was growing up, I thought I could be better, but I wasn't because I didn't have the resources. Not because I wasn't a good kid, and not because I wasn't a good student. I was a nerd. I was a really fucking good student, but the money wasn't always there for the programs I need to be in.
Sure.
And I had to depend on the kindness of strangers in a lot of ways. That's where the drug comes in. That's where the escapism comes in. That's where I can't make reality meet what I think it should be, so I'll just do drugs.
Right.
And that's real, dude. That's for real. So I just put it out there. Okay. So
That's
drugs.
that's great.
What was the third one? I apologize. I didn't want to.
Physical and emotional health.
Okay.
Talking about smaller children being better at externalizing and internalizing behavior issues because they have both parents involved rather than a single parent.
That one I'm not as well versed in, so I might not have a lot to say about that. What I will say is that when I was growing up, I always had this fantasy that fathers teach you the external world, how to do your taxes, how to vote, like how to drive. Right. And your mother teaches you the internal world, self-esteem, how to process feelings, how to get over guilt, how to make other people feel special. And I always felt that because I didn't have a dad, I had to learn the external stuff on the whim. Exactly. Yeah. As I went. And that was my responsibility. And so, yeah, that's the only thing I would say about that is that I always thought there was an external, internal world. And unfortunately, because I didn't have a dad, it was my responsibility to figure it out.
So what about children of single-parent homes being more than twice as likely to commit suicide?
Well,
I mean, we've kind of discussed it. I mean, you're in a situation where your reality does not match the reality that you were seeing on TV or in the movies. I mean, you can look at if we're keeping this along racial lines.
Of course.
You're looking at the Cosbys.
Yep.
Who he's a doctor.
That's
he's got
correct.
This very successful
that is
wife.
A very good example.
Right?
That's a very good example.
And you're like, well, how the hell did they get there and I'm way down here? How do you look at that? You're trying to be a good kid and you're in a very poor neighborhood and you've got...
Is it my fault? Did I somehow do something to deserve this poverty? Because the American narrative is that if you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, if you're smart enough, you work hard enough, you do the right things, you're going to have a successful life. But unfortunately for a lot of disenfranchised people, marginalized people, Black, Latino, Asian, that's not true. What it is, and for a lot of even white people, the true narrative is if you're lucky and you work hard and you make the right decisions and then you'll be okay.
Are able to take advantage of the opportunities that come along.
Correct.
I'm sure that it certainly has happened in my life. I'm sure it's happened in yours.
Of course.
There are opportunities that come along that you can't take advantage of because you don't have the money to go on that weekend retreat or on that particular field trip or college.
Absolutely.
Those sorts of things. Now, that said, if you are facing those sorts of like, this is what we are portraying as a successful family, that you need to make a certain amount of money, and you don't feel like you ever have an opportunity to do that.
That's correct.
And you're constantly surrounded by drugs and alcohol, and you don't have anybody providing you with... I take that back. You had your mom.
Yeah.
Right. So you certainly have your mom. But some people are unfortunate that they don't even have that. Their mom is the one who's addicted to drugs or alcohol. if you don't feel like you can ever achieve the success that's being portrayed around you, then you start to lose hope.
Correct.
Right?
No, there's a lot of truth.
So I think that kind of factors into this. Now, this is just me bullshitting, but I think that there is some truth behind it. So.
That's very true.
Round 2.
So what was the next one? I apologize.
It's all right. We talked about suicide, and then I think that's when we rewound. So we're going to take a look at some news topics here.
Very cool.
Let's see here. Children in grades 7 to 12 who have lived with at least one biological parent, youth that experienced divorce, separation, or non-union birth reported lower grade point averages than those who have always lived with biological parents.
Yeah. I think that's true, honestly, too.
Children living with their married biological father tested at a significantly higher level than those living with a non-biological father. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I could see that, but
Sure.
I don't know for sure.
Father involvement in schools is associated with a higher likelihood of a student getting mostly A's. That was true for fathers in biological parent families, for stepfathers, and for fathers heading single parent families.
Wow.
So dads are what drive the grades. So
Yeah.
this does not speak to your specific experience, since you succeeded despite that.
Well, and can I say that my father still had a part to play by not being there. And what I would say is this. Here's part of my history. When I was in high school, I was in a predominantly black high school. It was terrible. I hated it for 9th grade. I mean, I really hated it because I didn't fit in. I liked Shakespeare. I talk like this. I have always talked like this, Matt. This isn't new occurrence. I did not fit in. I wore sweater vests. I wore ties to public school. I didn't fit in. So what I will say to you is that in 9th grade, I was getting great grades. I was the teacher's assistant to my Spanish teacher, Miss Hoy. I was the poetry or the news editor of my grade's newsletter, and I was the only. We had 2 black males that were in honors English with my teacher, Dr. Clinton. I was one of them. So I was definitely bucking the system insofar as my grades. I was getting great grades. The problem was, I almost feel like part of the reason why I was motivated to succeed in general, and whatever I did, was to kind of prove to my dad that he should come back and that I was worth it. There was always a sense that I wasn't worth it, and that's why he left. And so all these actions I would do would be to prove to him, even if he didn't see it, or maybe he did. Maybe he had CIA spies because he was a king of a fictional African country.
Right.
Maybe he would get wind of the fact that his son is doing these amazing things and come back. And in that weird way, even though I didn't have a dad, my dad influenced my behaviors. It's you never aren't influenced by your parents, even when they're not there. You're just not. And that's, whatever the myth is around that, it's just not true. You know? So, I don't know.
Okay. 71% of high school dropouts are fatherless. Fatherless children have more trouble academically, scoring poorly on tests of reading, mathematics, and thinking skills. Children from father-absent homes are more likely to be truant from school, more likely to be excluded from school, more likely to leave school at age 16, and less likely to attain academic and professional qualifications in adulthood.
You know, I don't disagree with these findings, and I say that because my whole belief was that the father handles the external part of the development,
Right.
and the mother handles the internal part, even when they're not trying to. And so all of these are the things in which the world can see how you've succeeded or what you've done in school and in education and in proficiency and in success. It's consistent with my theory. Now, don't get me wrong. Everything I said was a theory. It's full. I could be full of shit, but that's consistent with what I'm talking about.
I think it's really interesting that you say that, because in reading this and listening to you, thinking back for myself, because it's all about me, apparently.
Of course it is.
Of course it is.
It's your show, man.
I was way more concerned about my dad looking at my grades.
Oh, hell yes.
Than my mom was.
Oh, yeah.
My mom would have been, or my mom generally was, well, what's wrong?
Yeah.
Is there something else that's going on? Regardless of your grades, we still love you, those sorts of things.
Of course. That's
my
the thing.
dad, why are you getting a D in biology?
Yeah. What the hell is going on?
What the hell is this F about?
Yeah.
You need to buckle down. You're going to concentrate entirely on, in this instance, it was chemistry in 7th grade. 7th grade chemistry, I was getting an F. And so my dad saw that, and he's like, you are not going to fail. You are going to turn this grade around. So that grade went from an F to a B.
Wow.
To a point where my teacher was bragging about it to the rest of the class. Like,
wow.
This is a dramatic turnaround on this grade. Well, that was great for chemistry, but in my math class, I had dropped from like a B to a D because I was so science focused.
Like, no, I have to,
Right. And I know that entire 7th grade year, I was constantly like skipping from one to the other, trying to overcompensate in different ways. It's like a car on the road when it's really icy. You turn the wheel. Oh my God, no! Oh my God!
Steer to the skid. It's like, no.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, I don't know what to make of the numbers. I can make up theories and
of
stuff
course.
like anybody else can as to why that might be. From what we've talked about previously, prior to the show, I get the impression that you had other people in your same situation around you. Mm-hmm. So, from your observations, what was other people's experience of growing up without a dad that you witnessed?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a very good question. The first thing I want to say is I'm going to finish off what I was saying about. I think that my theory about a father handling the external and a mother handling the internal, I think that comes from a certain amount of biology. Mothers literally carry us. And so they're like, this is my child. They can do no wrong. I love you. I'm emotionally connected to you in a way that even though your father loves you, can never really know you like I do. And so I'll forgive all sins because just because you exist, you're valuable. Whereas a father's like, well, yeah, you exist, but what value are you adding to the world? There's this weird thing. So that's what I would say is that's my theory on what's going on there.
I'm going to interrupt you there because I think that's a really, really interesting thought.
Right?
There's a certain amount of, I'm picturing like deer out in the forest of like, the mother gives birth and feeds the child.
Oh, nurtures
and brings them along.
Yeah.
And the father deer,
who the fuck are you?
Right. Can you stand on your own?
Yeah. What are you doing?
Can you survive on your own?
Yeah.
Because I'm busy doing my own thing. Can you make it?
That's goddamn right, dude.
Right.
So. Okay, but my experiences with other people in my neighborhood and in my life with their fathers. So I used to have a friend named Mark Craig. Mark Craig. So look him up, Google him. I don't know what Mark's up to nowadays, but he was very similar situation. We were actually best friends, partly because we had mothers but no fathers, and Mark was interesting. Mark was someone who I was kind of nerdy in school. He was actually 2 years ahead of me, but he was not known for his intelligence. But Mark, in his later life, I've heard from my mother, actually did achieve a certain amount of academic success. What I'm starting to think about, and it's interesting that we're bringing this up in this conversation, I think Mark's stupid act, or that's not accurate, but his Mark portraying himself as less intelligent may have been because we had a lot of men that we grew up with, boys, that did not, intelligence was not a trait that was valued in black men. Bottom line. When I was growing up, me being smart was not a good thing among my peers.
Right.
And so Mark was smart enough to figure that out and then act dumb. Whereas me, I was a dummy and acted smart. And so, and so Mark had...
Dummy in what sense? I mean, if you're getting good grades, that doesn't necessarily correlate.
So what I would say is this.
Street smarts are we talking about?
Mark was street smart enough to know that while he was able to do academics, he didn't need anyone to know he could do academics.
I see.
I was street stupid enough that I thought being smart in academics was the end-all be-all, and I was proud of it and let everyone know I was good at academics.
Okay, so Mark could read a room.
Boom. And I could not.
Okay.
And so Mark dated more. Mark dated a girl who I wanted to date, actually. And yes, he was older.
How dare you, Mark? How dare you?
And yes, he was 2 years older, so he had the advantage age-wise. But it was also because he was seen as a black man, macho.
Sure.
The girl who I was interested in, okay, here we go. Now this is going to get real. Mark was dating this girl named Marcia Owens.
Marcia.
Exactly, Marcia. You have beautiful kids on Facebook, but so Marcia was someone I had been attracted to. We were friends, but she was the kind of friend who I was very much attracted to. Marcia's parents loved me. I was the boring guy who was safe.
Sure.
And I also tutored Marcia in some subject. I can't even remember which one. But there was some subject where she was having difficulty. I would come to her house and we would talk about it. And her father loved me. And if I remember correctly, her father was Muslim. Mark was just older and dumb. And so she dated him, not me. Her parents endorsed me. I got no play. Mark was not liked by her parents, but he actually dated her. That was the story of my life. And I think Mark understood that, unfortunately, because of a bunch of kids not having fathers, men were just expected to be dumb. Women were could be smart, dumb, whatever. They didn't have any. They needed to be pretty, but they could be dumb or smart. Who cares? And I was such an outlier because of it. So, to your point, I don't think these are wrong. I think that where I grew up probably colored how I am. And how I am was been always isolated because even among my peer group, I wasn't seen as a peer. Yeah. So
okay. So let's move on to crime.
Yay! I was waiting for you to bring up crime.
Well, adolescents living in intact families are less likely to engage in delinquency than their peers living in non-intact families. Compared to peers in intact families, adolescents in single-parent families and step-families were more likely to engage in delinquency. This relationship appeared to be operating through differences in family processes, parental involvement, supervision, monitoring, and parent-child closeness between intact and non-intact families. So what I get out of this is you're not my dad.
Can I take a pass on that one? Oh, no.
Sure
I'm not
can.
joking.
No, yeah.
I'm actually taking a pass. The only thing I can say about this one, Matt, this is loaded. This is one of those rare instances where I would say that the studies are good, but I don't know if I'm going to be your best source of information.
That's fine.
Because I think the black thing overrides the not having a dad thing. What do I mean by that?
What do you mean by that, Derek?
When you're impoverished, marginalized, disenfranchised, and you don't have a lot of access to resources, you're going to be more predisposed to crime because you see on the television and in other aspects of your life that people have a house, a car, a television, whatever. You don't. How do I make the gap? How do I make that just? How do I fix that? I could steal some shit. So in my culture, crime is always on the table. So I don't know if it's good for me to really. My experiences are legitimate, but I think my experiences may skew if we're trying to focus on if it's a fatherless issue or if it's a black issue.
Sure.
That's
we don't have to draw that line today.
Yeah. But
right?
I mean,
in context of having a father versus not having a father, or having some substitute, and I don't like that word.
Of course, no, I get that.
This is painting it in one particular way.
Yeah.
And I'd be more interested in reading more about this because it talks about, compared to peers with intact families, adolescents in single-parent families, and step-families. The step-families part is what bothers me. Because in my experience, and we're not talking about my experience in this instance, but in my experience, I was blessed with two step-parents, both a stepmother and a stepfather,
which is good,
who cared and loved for me. I was incredibly blessed to be surrounded by the people that I was. Four parents.
I had one.
Right.
You asshole.
Right. I had luxury. I had bonus parents. And there's actually a trend of step parent sounds terrible. Right. Because you get the idea of
the Disney Disney stepmother,
all that kind of stuff.
No.
And so there are families out there that refer to the new spouses as a bonus mom or a bonus dad to put a different spin on it to get away from the stigma of that.
That's cool.
And I hope that more people gravitate towards that.
Like in the Northwest, a bonus room, which we didn't have on the East Coast, by the way. Bonus rooms were an extra room.
Right.
I don't know what the fuck is a bonus room. And it was
it's
amazing.
usually like a mud room or something.
Apparently, I didn't know this, but yeah, you're right. We had basements.
Yeah. Let's see here. A study of 109 juvenile offenders indicated that family structure significantly predicts delinquency.
I could see that.
I don't know. I have a whole lot to add or detract from that.
Me neither on that one. I would just say, again, and maybe I'm using it as a crutch, but if your father teaches you external, civics, taxing, law, working,
and adheres to those things.
Exactly. Then without your father, you're really at a disadvantage for all the civil, public, external things that you take for granted. Right. And this would match with that theory. Again, I could be full of shit, but I feel like there's some correlation going on there. Even if it's not causation, correlation.
Sure. Yeah. Children aged 10 to 17 living with two biological or adoptive parents were significantly less likely to experience sexual assault, child maltreatment, other types of major violence, and non-victimization type of adversity and were less likely to witness violence in the families compared to peers living in single-parent families and step-families.
Well, so I will speak to that very quickly, and I will say that I can't speak to that because I wasn't abused by any parental figure. What I would say is that I can very well imagine that if you're not the primary biological parent, you may have less of a emotional bond to. Ooh, you may have. Is it pause? Stop?
No, it's still going,
Okay.
but we're running out of time.
Oh, we're running out of time.
We're almost out of time. So
Okay.
with that, I'm going to ask one quick question.
Please do.
I hope that we can continue this another day.
Of course, we can do this.
Okay. What is your favorite dad joke?
So my favorite dad joke is wow. Yeah, you asked me this in the beginning.
I did.
Dad joke. It's got to be corny. It's got to be. You know, the funny part is I'm a very corny person, very punny person.
You are.
And for whatever reason, I've completely blanked on dad jokes. I'm gonna have to get back to you on that. Unfortunately,
All right.
I'm not good.
We'll post it in the notes or something.
Absolutely.
I
We'll do a
got
part
all
two.
of my stats from fathers.com. I haven't verified any of the stats beyond that, so feel free to look at their sources, and you can verify it there. We'll be back another time in order to go over more information.
This is
in the
part
meantime-
one.
This is
Part one, folks.
There will be follow-ups galore on that. In the meantime, I'm going to ask our audience for their favorite fantasy dad from media, whether it be movies or TV. Maybe it's Mike Seaver. Maybe it's
Mufasa.
Mufasa.
good
Whoever
call.
you decide to choose, go ahead and post it in the comments, and we'll take it from there. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your support, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks again.
Seriously, and I mean seriously, I've had to lose some serious hairs asleep because of this perilous pair of trees in the street. Oh, waving goodbye-bye, and everybody's talking about the times of the sign. And now, thank you for the haircut, Sanders and thanks for the trim. Thank you for the haircut, Sanders and thanks for the trim, the trim, the trim. Welcome to my misfit neighborhood. Welcome to my misfit neighborhood. Telephones are shaking my bones, and the motorcycle hounds are compiling dark tones. Made of people, places, and things. It's people, places, and things.